This one is also a spooky one, but in a very different way. It is in a way or a suspect that we haven't ever dug into before. So this is the ghost women of the 1920s.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm curious.
Circa 1900s, okay? And when I say that, I mean anywhere between 1900 to 1920, at least for this first part of the story. America was growing. It was a time of creating new things, of finding new things. You had all kinds of inventions coming out. Edison doing crazy things, Tesla doing crazy things. And, it was all kinds of new stuff. They were developing the periodic table during that time.
Industrial Revolution times.
Yep, the Industrial Revolution. Also a time for war, but there was this new chemical that was out, all right? And it was such a craze that people were putting it in everything. So they were putting it in their cosmetics. They were putting it in their lipstick. They were putting it in their milk. They even had put it in jock straps because they believed this chemical was so great, you guys, so great that it would improve men's sexual drive.
Oh, gosh.
And lasting and things like that. So, there was, it was in toothpaste. It was in...
So everyone was just getting poisoned. Literally everybody.
Day spas. And what they would do is the women or men would come in there and they would go and hang out in the water and come out glowing, okay? So what was making them glow? It was a chemical known as radium, which was a semi-new chemical, and because it was in literally every healthcare product and every makeup product, well, the higher end ones, it wasn't uncommon on a New York night to be walking down the road and see a woman literally glowing.
What?
No, literally glowing. So her skin glowing, or her lips glowing, or, her eyeshadow glowing, something of that nature. So what exactly was radium? So in 1989, Marie Curie and her husband Pierre found this chemical, and it is radium is a chemical element with the symbol Ra and atomic number 88. It is the sixth element in group 2 of the periodic table, also known as the alkaline earth metals. So it is found in earth. Pure radium is silvery white, but it readily reacts with nitrogen rather than oxygen upon exposure to air, forming a black surface layer of radium nitride. All isotopes of radium are radioactive. All of it is radioactive. The most stable isotope being radium-226 with a half-life of 1,600 years. When radium decays, it emits ionizing radiation as a byproduct, which can excite fluorescent chemicals and cause radioluminescence. So, it glows, in short, all right?
Yeah, radioactive, like glowing.
Yeah, so it glows. It's fluorescent.
Scary.
But who were these ghost women? Well, there was... It wasn't uncommon in the early 1900s, with the wars raging on, with the World War raging on, that women were getting jobs in factories, all right? But
right.
The downside of that is women weren't getting paid very good, all right? So when radium had come out, there was a doctor who wanted to do a whole bunch of testing with it, was literally blown away, blown off the map, was in complete shock and awe over the stuff. And that doctor's name was Dr. Sabin A. von Sashaki? I don't know. Sashaki, inventor of a radium paint used to illuminate watch dials. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to back up from that. So, because he wanted to do a bunch of healthcare exams and tests and everything else, he realized that he needed funding for that, which ultimately led him to take his radium, mix it into paint, and come up with this amazing glowing paint. And dude, this guy was obsessed with radium. So, he walked around everywhere with radium in a glass vial in his pocket, like obsessed. Any chance he got, he would sit back in his chair and just look at it, stare at it. He literally always had it with him. Yeah, so...
I mean, I guess it would be pretty incredible when they never had anything like this before.
No,
this is
they
totally
didn't.
new.
Some chemical out of the earth that once oxygen hits it, it glows.
Yeah,
well, not oxygen, it's nitrogen, but there's nitrogen in our air, which is causing it to glow.
It would be absolutely incredible. It would be like magic.
It would be like magic, so it makes sense, right? So What did this guy do with it? He wanted to fund his medical research, so he came up with the paint, okay? And that paint was then used for science-based painting. Like, what I mean by that is when the war's going on, you're in the trenches, okay? And in the trenches, it is completely dark. You don't want light because snipers and people on the other side of the battlefield can see you and know where to shoot.
Right.
And normally there's people up top watching the battlefield and there's other people on the other side watching the battlefield. You're watching each other. And the first person to see some movement over there, they're going to shoot them. So you can't have a fire. That's too bright. So they started using radium. They started putting radium in glass vials and walking around, and it illuminated just enough to be able to see things where they were going. Maybe they needed to put it on the ground because that was an entrance to where they slept. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of uses, but the real big uses started coming once they realized they can put it on watches. So if you needed to know what time it was at night, you could see your dial. They had, 1 through 12 and the hands painted.
Nice.
They needed people to paint these, and all our men are off at war. There is women that are lining up to take over the previously male jobs.
In the factories.
Yeah, to get a wage. Now, what was nice about this is this job, from everything that I did research on, paid 3 times what every other factory job did. And it was looked at as a cushy job. You got to sit on a chair at a desk all day long and get paid for every watch face that you painted. It seemed like a dream job to most of these women. Well, the technique that they were using, because think of a watch dial on your wrist that is so tiny, they would have these little baby brushes, all right? And they would have to paint really quick on these little baby brushes, and after you were painting for a while, the brush would start to fray. So what they would do is, it was called lip pinning, I think.
Right. You take the brush between your lips and you squish it like you...
Yes.
Yeah, you would just squish it between your lips to make it go to a point again.
Lip pointing. It was called lip pointing. And it was actually instructed by the factory to do this. So all the women would, paint a third or a half of their watch, and their brush bristles would start to fray a little bit. So they would dip it in the water, dip it in the paint, or dip it in the water, and then do the lip pointing, and then dip it in the paint and continue painting. And they did that over and over and over a day, probably putting the brush, hundreds of times in their mouth. There are 5 women that we're going to be focusing on here that actually got dubbed the Radium Girls because of this. And this is an awful true crime story, literally horrible. It almost doesn't sound real, honestly. And these 5 women was Catherine Schaub, Grace Fryer, Quinta Magia, Albina Magia, and Edna Hussman, and I'm sure I hacked at least a couple of those. So, but in 1918, Catherine starts breaking out with lots of pimples. So let me back up. So these 5 women had been working in the factory for a year before this time. So we're kind of fast tracking past all that part. They had been sitting there on their chairs doing their lip pointing with the watch faces and painting and dipping and painting and dipping and paint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they had been there for about a year. All right. And all 5 of these women. Now, Catherine in 1918 starts to break out with a whole bunch of pimples. And not only that, but as she was at work, she also noticed some of the other women breaking out in a whole bunch of pimples. And noticed that some had some like redness around the mouth and things like that. And so she goes to see a doctor to find out what's going on. And these women have already been in this factory for, over a year, not to mention the women that were there before them. And this doctor does an in-depth diagnosis onto her and said that it's due to hormones because of her age, because she was 15 years old. So...
What? She was only 15?
Yes, she was only 15.
Oh my gosh, that's so sad.
Yes, it is awful.
She's literally poisoning herself.
Yep. So, but one funny thing is today, as a woman, you wouldn't go to your doctor and just be written off for hormones anymore. That's such an awful thing.
I mean, you could be. You still could be. But
it's not the
with
same.
pimples, but it's not exactly the same. But they also didn't understand the dangers back then.
Yeah, but it's not the same, and that's not how they meant it. So
Okay.
You're thinking to evolved like today. That is not how they meant it whatsoever back then.
Yeah, it's
that
true.
was the go-to women sign-off. So when a woman was too smart, when a woman was too successful, when a woman was sick and needed help or support, when a woman needed anything other than to not say anything and do whatever she was told, everyone wrote them off as being hormonal. Yep. So she went back to work and continued noticing these things standing out among her peers. Okay, now in a few months later, she noticed she was having a toothache. Okay. So a little bit more severe, right? And she goes to see a doctor, and this doctor checks her blood, tries to find out what is going on, and they run a whole bunch of tests on her, and this doctor believes that she was having phosphorus poisoning, something called Fossy jaw, okay? Because remember, she's having pimples, she's having tooth pain, some uncomfortability, some tiredness, redness, things like that. So the doctor, like I said, does an in-depth, I guess, panel for that time, but determines that it's phosphorus poisoning, and explains to her that the term that they use is called Fossy jaw, and essentially what it will do is with phosphorus poisoning, it will degrade and eat your bones so much with the consumption of phosphorus that it will literally make your jaw fall off. So she's super concerned about this.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, she's super concerned about this. So she goes back to her work because these women aren't told what's in this, right, when they're painting. They're trained a certain way to do it, to get the best work possible, and to just continue their work day in and day out. So she brings these concerns to the manager. She tells all her friends about it. That manager says, "Oh no, it's completely safe. This is completely safe in the warehouse. This paint, this radium paint. But thank you for telling me that. I'm sure that it's just hormones. And he takes it up to his manager and lets him know about the complaint. He takes it up to his manager, lets him know about the complaint. And he takes it up to his manager, lets him know about the complaint. And what ends up happening is Dr. Sabin, who, due to everything that had been going on with the success of the company, with the use of radium, with the radium being in all these different products, was looked at like a superstar, literally. So for Dr. Sabian to come into their plant and have a coaching session with them was super uncommon, and everyone there was like shocked, amazed that Dr. Sabian was here. But he essentially told them that, look, there's no phosphorus in any of this. We aren't using phosphorus, so I'm not sure what your doctor told you, but it's wrong. And they go on their way, right? And they ask at one point about the paint and the glowing paint, and he does end up letting them know that, you know, what you're painting with, it's been known that in large quantities, okay, super large quantities, that it can make you sick, it can make you ill, but because of how little we use here, you have nothing to worry about. And it made all these women feel better, and they just went right back to their job, essentially. Ugh. And yeah.
Why didn't at that point, why the heck didn't they just use something else to point the brush? Like, you could literally use like a sponge,
a piece of paper,
or a piece of paper, or anything. Just, you don't have to use your lips.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to do that. So if there's even a chance, why?
I guess here's a good time to insert this, okay? So for the rest of the story, because the rest of the story just gets super gnarly. So both of these people knew about the dangers of this. So this Dr. Sabin, as he is here giving this statement, telling these women that that paint is completely safe, at one time got some radium under his fingernail accidentally while handling it. It started burning so badly under his fingernail that he cut off his finger.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Sabin had also talked with the founder of this product, and Pierre had said that he would never be in the same room with the stuff. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Anyways, these
Gross.
women, I agree. These women went back to work, okay, and
you mean these young teenagers?
Well, they were all ages. They were all different ages here, but yes, there were quite a few young teenagers, but
kids.
They went back to work, and the war essentially ended, and this industry blew up, man. Everybody wanted to watch, and what's interesting is they went from about 50 workers on the factory floor to about 200 workers on the factory floor, and continued using this lip pointing way of controlling the brush, you know. And everyone started wanting these watches. So the doctor who owned this company had dropped his interest in working with the medical aspects of this chemical and focused solely on the watch aspects, and was led by the money. They even went to 7-day work weeks. So now these women are required to work 7 days a week using this lip pointing service. Well, of course, their health started getting much, much, much worse. And one of these women that we talked about in the beginning, Molly Maggia, in 1921, she went to the dentist with a bad tooth, okay? The dentist pulls the tooth, which is what they would do in 1921, and sends her on her way. It doesn't get better. The pain actually gets worse and gets far worse. So she ends up going back to her dentist to have it pulled again, or to have it checked out again. And the dentist is blown away, shocked that it hasn't healed at all. And it's actually worse. And he can't explain why. Doesn't understand why. So he sends her to a different dentist. And she gets sent to a Dr. Joseph Neff, which is a mouth expert, like focuses on diseases and things like that, and was, after doing the examination, realized that she had sores literally all over her entire jaw, all over her mouth, like in her ears and everything, and had no idea what it was. So instructs her to come back once a week to get checked out. Well, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And at one point, he believes that she has syphilis. He's like, absolutely, it's syphilis, 100%, that's what it is. And why I point that out is because during all this drama, this company kept trying to lean into the fact that all these women had syphilis from, like, they were trying to suggest they were sleeping together or being ridiculous, like hormonal, you know what I mean? Just ridiculous stuff. But
trying to pass it off as anything other than their product, their factory and company's
not
fault.
anything. They were trying to do it in a really shady, mean way that when people back then who had syphilis were like pushed out of society.
A misogynistic type way too.
Yeah, absolutely. By embarrassing them.
And syphilis was, they were definitely shunned.
Yeah.
There was no cure.
Yeah.
And it made people crazy.
Yep.
And have sores and everything.
But so she keeps coming back, and ultimately she gets bad really quick, dude. From the first time that she sees him, 3 months later, she is bedridden.
Oh my gosh.
She ends up having to quit her job. Her entire mouth is one big infection, and it spreads to her throat, and it spreads to her jugular vein, and starts eating away at the tissue of her.
Oh my god.
Of her veins in her neck. So she ends up passing away. Within 2 more years, 12 more women die in very similar circumstances and way. Nothing is looked into this, and these women know something is wrong, okay? But one woman ends up coming forward, Grace Fryer, who had ended up leaving that industry and became a bank teller, but she was getting sick in the same way that everyone else did. And all of them noticed that it started with a toothache. There was just this unexplainable disease that started with a toothache and just progressively got worse from there.
She got sick after quitting?
Oh, yeah. So, yes. So, this Dr. Joseph Neff was a specialist for this area, so he ended up seeing a lot of these women, all right? And he started putting things together because he couldn't explain it. What is going on here? I don't get it. I've never seen anything like this before. He ends up asking his peers around the country if they've ever seen anything like this before. And 2 other doctors had, and it just so happens to be near the other plants in the country. So
Radium factories.
Yep, he starts putting it together, okay, and goes to the radium factory and tries doing some research and is not able to get anything out from him because he's told that it's a top secret paint. He's not allowed to know what the ingredients are, but they will tell him that it's not phosphorus because it looks like phosphorus poisoning. So he has no idea what to do. He knows something's wrong. They end up including a scientist from Harvard. That scientist does a whole bunch of research into this and finds out that, hey, it is actually the radium, and there has been radium everywhere, radium dust powder, before they put the water in it because it comes in a powder. Once you open that powder container, it literally goes everywhere. So they were exposed to radium the entire time. And what's interesting is the higher-ups, as they're walking through factories and doing factory visits, they were wearing protective clothing. And these women were trained to lip point the brushes. Now, once you have radiation poisoning, there is no stopping it. So every woman that did this ever, even if she left in 6 months and got another job, was ultimately impacted by this. So there are no for sure numbers here, but it is believed that the people of this company and this doctor essentially murdered hundreds of people doing this, all for the cause of money. Yeah.
So did they ever get in trouble?
No, they never got in trouble. What ultimately ended up happening was that they sued them, and they settled, and each woman got what would be compared to today about $1.5 million. And none of them lived to spend it.
Right, they all died.
They all died.
It went to their families.
They all died a gruesome, horrible death. Now, just to give you guys an example of how bad this was without going like too deep into their stories or anything, most of these women had to go to this court case literally being rolled in on a bed, on a hospital bed, or pushed in a wheelchair. Some of the effects was their spines were deteriorating. They were unable to walk. They had no padding in between the bones in their spines. Now, another interesting fact to this is our bodies mistake radium for calcium. So when they're licking this, their body is not only getting ripped apart. I don't know if you guys know what radiation does, but the best way to think of it is microscopic bullets, okay, that go through everything, literally everything. And they're just constantly microscopic bullets ripping holes in you. And that's the best description I was given that helped me understand exactly like what was going on here. Why does it cause tumors? Why does it cause growths? Why does it cause holes and things like that? Because it is just microscopic, tiny, indestructible bullets that are ripping through everything around it. But as they're licking these, their body is absorbing it and putting it in all their bones.
Right.
Their whole body.
Because it mistakes it as calcium. Exactly.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women, as their men are off in war, fighting for the country. This idiot was back home taking advantage of them for the sake of money. You know, when the Harvard scientists came out and asked, what's his face, Dr. Sabian, Dr. Sabian admitted he knew. And then when he was asked, well, why haven't you said anything? Why did you continue doing this? He told them that these girls were not under his jurisdiction, not under his part of the company.
What?
Yeah. Right?
Didn't he do like some kind of workshop or visit with them?
Yes, he did.
Right.
So if anything, like why I wanted to highlight this is, you know, it's not as simple as like a serial killer, but it's just as detrimental to society and people and women.
It's evil.
When corporations being driven by one single evil man that was highlighted as one of the greatest people ever to walk this earth, was so focused on the money and such a lack of humanity. The amount of people hurt by this was tenfold what most serial killers can even dream of.
Yeah.
The after effects of this were so insane. Not to mention, like, I just can't believe that.
Did any of these women birth children while they were?
That's not something that's talked about. But I will tell you that once they started licking the paintbrush, none of them lived past like 6 years or something. Like, it is a insanely quick death.
And when you're radioactive to other people you touch too. So you're technically poisoning them too. It may be lower amounts, but like if they had kids at home, if they had a husband, like.
So these same scientists did research on the bodies as they were passing away. And Molly was one of them, the one that went to see that Dr. Joe right in the beginning, one of the first ones that sparked his interest in this and trying to figure it out, find out why. When they did testing on her bones, they found her bones had lethal amounts of radium. Her bones literally glowed.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Now, I couldn't find confirmation of this, but according to another content creator, which I probably should have wrote the name down, but I'll probably post a picture here. She said that she found confirmation that one of the women went in to see a doctor one time and her literal jaw, like, fell out of her mouth, dude.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. This is a heinous act. Horrible.
So
and
bad.
The only thing that they had to do was pay, what would it have been? Like so like $6.5–7 million worth. And this was one of the biggest companies in the entire world.
Yeah, so that was like nothing for them.
Yeah, so it was like nothing. And they denied it. They tried to scare these women. They tried to tell America that these women were just hormonal and sleeping with each other, and they all had syphilis, and no one should listen to them. And once these other doctors and scientists got involved, they couldn't hide from it anymore, and the nation caught on to it. So it's just a really tragic, sorry story, and one of the worst ways that I could think someone could die.
I know.
Dude.
It had to be so painful and awful.
And in true crime, we look at serial killers a lot, but this sounds so much worse.
Yeah.
So much worse.
I don't know if it's worse. It's pretty bad, though.
When I'm thinking of worse, I'm thinking the overall, right? There are so many people that ended up losing their life, and every single one of them was in the worst way possible. These women were in horrible pain. They could feel everything. Every nerve was on fire. Infections on their entire head and upper
Very
body.
Slow
and
death.
It wasn't that slow.
5
years
for that much pain, dude.
Yeah.
That is slow. Are you kidding me? It's not as instantaneous as you're dead in a few hours, or right away. It's literally prolonged suffering.
And the half-life is 1,600 years. You know that there's this. Supposedly, if you get like a Geiger counter and you go to their graves, it'll go off.
I bet.
That's scary stuff, man.
Yeah.
But I'd love to know what you guys think about it. I thought it was super interesting. I thought it was super sad.
It is sad.
Supposedly, this helped pave the way for OSHA. So at least in stories like this, I always try and look for the positive. And there is no positive of the actual crime that happened here, the actual travesty that happened here. But OSHA coming out of it is a positive, at least, because we tried to fix it and make sure this couldn't happen again. Obviously, there's been tons of other corporations that have taken advantage of people, but I feel like at least we tried to learn from it.
Safety standards are really important.
Yeah.
Super important, especially in labor like this and factories and things like that. But that is a positive that more regulation came out of it.
I think they knew right away, and that's why they paid triple.
Probably.
I haven't seen somebody connect that, but why? For a job that's less strenuous, for a job that is working with a chemical where most of these women were like, oh my gosh, please, I would have worked here for free with radium because of how expensive it was and everything. You know they had radium milk?
Yeah.
What? The radium jock straps are ridiculous. What is the point?
A glowing jock strap?
Yeah, dude. It's crazy. How
many people were poisoned by radium back then? But I think you're right. When you said they were paid triple, I was like, right away I was thinking, did they know?
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
'Cause why?
I mean, you said he got that thing stuck under his fingernail. I think he knew.
Yeah.
I think he did.
Yep. But let us know what you think. Have you seen this movie? 'Cause I haven't. I know there's a movie.
I have.
You have? Oh, I know there's a movie.
It's good.
Is it?
Yeah.
But this is super interesting and super sad and absolutely a true crime. So I'd love to know what you guys think. And leave it in the comments below.